Right now it's time to welcome Eric Kulish, our air cargo expert, to the show this morning. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Kaylee. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you as well. And let's just jump right into it. We just finished out the first quarter of 2022, starting to get some airline earnings rolling in. We've got Delta Airlines reporting this morning, cargo volumes once again killing it.
Yeah, Delta's always one of the first in earnings season to go, and they had a really good overall performance. Even though they lost money, they lost about $790 million, I think, on an operating basis. And after a slight profit last quarter, but that was considered pretty good. Better than expectation just because of the Omicron variant in the winter and reduced travel and so forth. So they're very bullish on, second quarter bounce back to some profitability and overall. And I can go into some of that in a minute. But on the cargo side, they continued their real strong performance since the pandemic. They've, started to put a lot of emphasis on cargo. They made $289 million in revenue, and that was 51% up from the 2019 benchmark pre-pandemic. It was $74 million than last year's first quarter, and it was not too much below the fourth quarter, which is peak season of last year. So that was a pretty good showing. So, in the cargo. But the interesting thing was the cargo. The president of Delta was on the earnings call yesterday, and he made an allusion, or someone asked him about the situation in Shanghai with the lockdowns and all the backups at the ports. And he said that could weigh on revenue for the cargo sector in the second quarter, but that could be real small because they could get a real tailwind coming out of the lockdown once the lockdown in China clears. You have this massive backlog of cargo. Everyone wants to expedite what's been sitting there in the warehouses and stuck at the airport and the port. So they could see, a boomlet that's, bigger than what they've, had to defer temporarily. So I thought that was interesting. And then just the, how Delta, is a harbinger for what the domestic passenger industry is looking like for the recovery in, this summer and into the rest of the year.
Eric, did that earnings report offer any insight into how Delta is kind of mitigating those rising jet fuel costs that came along after the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or was there any mention of that, or is it really kind of still too early to tell?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. It's very interesting. Fuel prices are up about 50%, jet fuel about 50% from a year ago, and it's a really weighing on how, it's slowing the recovery for some of these airlines. They might not be able to bring back quite as many planes as fast as they weigh that demand cost base, supply and cost, equation. But they said they've been raising rates. There's so much pent up demand with travel right now, and they're seeing it currently and in forward bookings. And there's pricing power, and the airfares are sticking, and they've basically made up almost all of the jet fuel costs, passing it on through higher airfares. So, they may be eating a couple points of jet fuel price, but not that much. So that's been a real positive if you're an airline.
So Eric, good morning. Nice to see you again, my friend. So as we move forward a little bit, you mentioned the Shanghai. They're kind of looking at that as a blip, and demand will build up. I would imagine that everybody wanting to get it moving quickly, there'd be some additional fees or expedited fees that come along with that, and help for a little bit of a windfall to make up for any slowing that was there and the weak first quarter. But passenger movement and passenger, travel is starting to open up a little bit. Is there positive there on that side? Because that's where they make their money, right? I mean, the freight in the belly is extra revenue that is there, and it's paying the fuel at times, that type of stuff. But the money's in the passenger, right? Delta's in it for the passengers.
Absolutely. Absolutely for these. Yeah, absolutely. For these big passenger airlines, cargo is, has always been called the stepchild of the organization. Although, that's starting to change a little bit. There's recognition that cargo, as we've talked about on this show before, that cargo is a good way to diversify. Cargo demand looks very strong for years to come. It looks like a growth area and something that they can build on. So there's more emphasis on trying to support the cargo operation. But you're right, it's still a very small portion of the overall enterprise for these big passenger airlines. So, the passenger side seems to be coming along, surprisingly strongly heading into the peak summer season. Delta said they'll be profitable in the second quarter and for the full year. There's, forward bookings are strong. They said that, the business travel is about 70% of where it was in 2019. So that's very positive. And even international, they expect to start building. I think you'll see it a lot on the transatlantic routes, internationally, which is big for wide bodies. Not so much in Asia yet, especially with China and some other countries still grappling with the variants and having very strict protocols or measures. But, the outlook, especially for the U.S. airlines and even some of the European ones, is looking up. And as you mentioned, that'll slowly bring some more capacity for cargo into the market, which is, needed.
Absolutely. And so speaking of European airlines, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Air France KLM. They just put in another order for some Airbus freighters, correct?
Yeah, the Air France KLM placed a firm order for 4 Airbus A350 wide-body freighters. This is the new freighter from Airbus in the last few months. It's come out. It won't be ready or produced until middle of the decade, but it's on design now, being prototyped or getting ready for production. So, but it's going to be, Airbus is kind of, deferred or not had much of a cargo presence compared to Boeing as far as the production freighters. And so this is their big re-entry into full-fledged freighter aircraft. And they've done pretty well so far. So Air France KLM has ordered 4 with some options, and then they have 29 total, orders or commitments so far. So, that's pretty good. On the other side, Boeing has a new next generation freighter called the 777X, and they only have one customer so far. That's Qatar Airways. But on the positive side, they made a huge order because they don't have anything to do with Airbus. They're having a kind of a dispute with them. So they ordered like more than 30 of these planes. So with one order, they've almost equaled or exceeded what Airbus has in a couple months. But it'll be interesting to see how that race plays out.
Yeah, so let's talk about the EU a little bit more there. So the exemption for storing freight, I guess, above deck or in the seats there has now been lifted. It's gone away unless specific modification has been done. Is that spreading throughout the world? What is the thinking there? Is it just the capacity's back, or just, hey, there's a lack of no more emergency for these PPEs, et cetera, to get moving? What's the thought process there?
Yeah, exactly. As people will remember, and they thought it was pretty cool that during the height of the pandemic, you had a lot of these passenger airlines like Delta flying their passenger planes as, mini freighters. Most of them put the cargo in the belly, like where it normally rides, and flew, half empty with the passenger space. But they got temporary exemptions from the FAA and the European aviation regulators to, allow them, if they wanted, to put some light boxes in the passenger cabin. Some of them strapped them into the seats, put them under the seats, put them in the overhead bins. Some took out some seats and stacked more on the floors. But now that's all gone away. The FAA did away with its exemption in December, and now the European Aviation Authority safety agencies said, as of July 31st, the exemption we had goes away. So what you'll have to do if you want to have cabin cargo is go through the normal process of getting a supplemental type certificate, which is, kind of an engineering process approval of, kind of doing some modifications for, fire suppression systems and other safety measures, and, to modify the cabin a little bit. It's not a full-fledged conversion, but if you want to do that in a kind of a passenger variant, that's what you have to go through. Because, and they said the reason, as you alluded, hey, there's no more emergency anymore. There's enough capacity out there, passenger airlines flying. We don't need to make this emergency exemption anymore.
Yeah.
So that's over at kind of the middle of the summer, as you mentioned, that July 31st date. The FAA repealed that a while ago, right? At the end of last year?
Yeah.
All right, Eric.
Exactly.
So before we let you go today, let's touch on a story that you wrote on Tuesday about about the United planes and them were losing a little bit more capacity, correct?
Yeah, getting back to that whole, the topic we were talking about the passenger airlines coming back and bringing back that brings back naturally some capacity in the bellies for cargo. United Airlines has been one of the, just like Delta, they've even exceeded Delta as far as their cargo revenue and performance during the pandemic. But they've done it for the past year without 52 777-200s with these Pratt & Whitney engines. If you remember, one of their planes took off from Denver about a year ago and had a massive uncontained engine failure with debris sprinkling down on suburbs of Denver and had to make a landing. And so those planes have been grounded for longer than a year while the FAA looks into it. The FAA just put out some directives on how to do some modifications or, put some things in the engine to prevent the debris from, flying around and also do some more inspections. So United was planning to bring those planes back, but now, in April, it looks like they've pushed it back until May, according to CNBC. And so that's just, we'll have to see I'm not sure what the issue was. Hopefully those planes will start to come online, but it means less capacity or, new capacity coming back that, the cargo sector could have, utilized.
Excellent stuff, Eric. Thank you so much. We'll catch up with you again next week. And hey, everybody, check him out on freightways.com and on American Shipper. And he's Twittering and he's on LinkedIn. And check out Eric. Thank you so much, my friend. Have a great weekend. And speaking of weekends, we need to